Dear students, history buffs and explorers of the past, welcome to this in depth analysis of one of the most complex and transformative periods in human history, the post World War II era. We embark on a journey through decades that redefined nations, ideologies, and the daily lives of billions of people, laying the foundations for the world we live in today. The period following the Second World War represents a period of radical discontinuity and at the same time of surprising rebirth. The global conflict left a legacy of unprecedented rubble and devastation, both human and material. Cities were destroyed, economies were brought to their knees, and millions of lives were lost. Yet from this very chaos emerged the will to build something new and lasting. This was not a simple reset, but a true reboot, with new priorities and new structures. The impact of those years was so profound that it reshaped the world's political map, witnessing the birth of new nations and the redefinition of power relations among existing ones. At the same time, the economic map was reshuffled, with the emergence of new powers and the transformation of production systems. But not only politics and economics underwent changes, the global social map was also profoundly altered. The experiences of war had generated new awareness, redefined the role of entire social categories, and laid the foundations for new forms of organization and demands, marking the beginning of a new era full of challenges and opportunities. Among the most significant consequences of World War II was the emergence of a new geopolitical configuration, defined by the opposition between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This division led to the birth of a world divided into two opposing blocs, each with its own worldview and economic and social system. The United States positioned itself as the bastion of capitalism, an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and free enterprise. At the same time, the United States championed liberal democracy, emphasizing individual rights, political pluralism, and free elections as the pillars of governance. Its model was seen as the path to freedom and prosperity. On the other hand, the Soviet Union presented itself as the promoter of communism, an ideology that advocated the abolition of private property and the collective management of the means of production. The Soviet system was based on a planned economy and a single party, considered the vanguard of the proletariat and aimed at social equality and collective justice. This bipolarity dominated the international scene for decades, characterizing the so called Cold War. Although it never came to a direct military clash between the two superpowers, tension between the blocs was constant and palpable, fueled by profound mutual distrust and incessant competition. One of the most obvious manifestations of this tension was the spasmodic arms race, particularly nuclear arms. Both blocs amassed arsenals capable of destroying the world several times over, creating a balance of terror that deterred any direct attack but generated widespread anxiety and a constant apocalyptic threat. The competition was not limited to the military sphere but extended to every sphere of public and private life. From politics to economics, from science to art, from sports to culture, every success of one bloc was interpreted as a defeat of the other, in a constant demonstration of ideological and technological superiority. This omnipresent rivalry shaped societies on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Among the key events and symbols of this period, the Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, represents perhaps the most powerful image of division. The wall physically separated East Germany, under Soviet influence and a member of the Warsaw Pact, from West Germany, aligned with the United States and a member of NATO. This barrier of concrete and barbed wire became the tangible symbol of an iron curtain that cut in two not only a city, but an entire continent and two ideological worlds. Another moment of extreme tension was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The USSR secretly installed nuclear missiles on the Caribbean island a few miles from the American coast, triggering one of the most serious crises of the Cold War. For 13 long days, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war, with the threat of all out conflict seemingly imminent. The peaceful resolution of that crisis, through intense diplomatic negotiations and an American naval blockade, highlighted the fragility of peace in the nuclear age. It was a global wake up call, prompting the superpowers to establish more direct channels of communication, such as the Red Line, to avoid similar future dangers and impulsive actions. Those days taught that nuclear deterrence, while maintaining an armed peace, placed humanity at constant risk of self annihilation, making diplomacy an essential tool for survival. While the world was splitting into opposing blocs, Italy experienced a period of extraordinary internal transformation and explosive growth, known to history as the economic miracle. Immediately after the war, Italy was still a predominantly agricultural country, with a backward industry and an economy based on traditional sectors. However, between the mid 1950s and the early 1960s, Italy embarked on a process of accelerated industrialization and unprecedented modernization. This transformation led it to become one of the major industrial powers of the Western world, radically changing the nation's social and cultural fabric. Several factors contributed to triggering and sustaining this astonishing growth. A crucial role was played by aid from the Marshall Plan, a US economic assistance program aimed at rebuilding war ravaged European economies and stemming the spread of communism. These funds provided essential capital for the purchase of machinery and raw materials. Another determining factor was the presence of a low cost, abundant, and qualified workforce, often coming from the countryside or from less developed regions. This human resource allowed Italian companies to produce at competitive prices, stimulating exports and market expansion. Strong domestic demand, generated by a growing population and a gradual improvement in living conditions, gave a further boost to the economy. Added to this was equally strong foreign demand, particularly from European countries undergoing reconstruction. Italy was able to specialize in sectors such as household appliances, automotive, textiles, and clothing, finding markets ready to absorb its innovative quality products, establishing the Made in Italy label on an international scale. The results of this period were tangible and widely felt. Italy experienced unprecedented economic growth, with development rates that placed it among the most dynamic nations in the world. This led to a demographic and urban expansion of its cities, which became centers of attraction for millions of people seeking job opportunities and a better life. The population's standard of living improved significantly. The availability of durable consumer goods, such as refrigerators, washing machines, and televisions, transformed families' habits and expectations. The automobile, in particular, became a symbol of progress and individual freedom, testifying to the access of ever larger sections of the population to a previously unimaginable level of well being, marking the transition from a rural to a modern society. However, the economic miracle was not without its shadows and negative consequences. The speed of development generated significant social and territorial imbalances, with the industrialized North progressing at a much faster pace than the predominantly agricultural South. This growing gap between North and South widened, fueling internal migration and economic and social inequality that still pose a challenge to the country today. The economic boom, while bringing prosperity, profoundly reshaped Italy's social geography. In parallel with the profound global and national changes, another process of extraordinary importance was taking shape on the continent: European integration. After two devastating world wars, particularly the second, which had left Europe in ruins and divided, a strong need emerged to overcome the divisions of the past. European leaders understood that the only way to avoid future conflicts and ensure lasting peace was to create deep and irreversible bonds between the continent's nations, based on cooperation and solidarity. The goal was to build a united Europe, overcoming the extreme nationalisms that had caused so much destruction. It was clear that only through close cooperation between European countries could the continent be rebuilt and new geopolitical challenges, particularly the growing polarization of the Cold War, be addressed. The path towards integration was gradual and pragmatic, characterized by fundamental stages that laid the foundations of today's European Union. The first concrete step was the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, the ECSC, in 1951. This initiative, proposed by French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman, aimed to place the coal and steel production of France and Germany under a common authority, later extending to other founding states. The ECSC was not just an economic agreement, it represented the first concrete step toward economic and political integration that made new conflict between member states unthinkable. The success of the ECSC paved the way for a broader ambition: the creation of a common market. This aspiration was realized with the signing of the Treaties of Rome in 1957. With these treaties, six countries, Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, established the European Economic Community, the EEC. The EEC's primary objective was the creation of a common market with the free movement of goods, people, services, and capital between member states, eliminating tariffs and trade barriers. The EEC was more than just a free trade area, it laid the foundations for deeper economic and later political integration. It was the starting point for a series of developments that, through the establishment of common policies and the creation of new supranational institutions, would lead to the subsequent European Union thus transforming the continent. The process of European integration, despite its difficulties and moments of crisis, represented an important step toward a united and peaceful Europe. It demonstrated that cooperation and dialogue could prevail over centuries old hostilities, offering a model of governance and coexistence unique at the global level. This journey, begun on the ashes of a devastated continent, continues to shape the destiny of hundreds of millions of citizens today in a constant balance between national sovereignty and common goals. European integration remains an evolving project, a living testimony to the human capacity to learn from the mistakes of the past and build a collaborative future.